Okay, well, let me just say this in terms of what I have been um, looking at in relation to not just the Caribbean, but also around the world. One of the things that I came across in terms of information is that a lot of times these IMF loans are actually, the IMF really is actually a conduit for loans that are or monies that are given to them from countries, and this is how they're able to give so much money. And many times, a lot of the IMF loans are actually backed by China. They're actually backed by um, larger countries that are seeking to get into the Caribbean because I don't think that we understand that right now both the IMF, the World Bank, and larger developed countries like China, they understand that debt is the new economic power. Okay. Unfortunately, our leadership here in the Caribbean does not understand that. We have leadership that's more self-centered versus national development or widespread prosperity. So it's easier for uh, larger countries like China and the IMF to capture smaller developing nations like the Caribbean because our leadership is on a lower threshold. They're on a lower level of consciousness to the leadership, for example, China. Okay, so a lot of times, what I've realized from my own personal studying on this and why they can have access to so many loans and access to loans so easily, and you're constantly seeing 450 million here, another 75 million here, another 150 million here, another 1 point whatever. And you're constantly seeing these loans coming in and they're coming in, they're coming in. But to what avail? We just heard um, our friend said that in Jamaica, you had a doctor came there to perform surgery free, and they don't have the basic technology. How is that possible with so many loans being borrowed there in Jamaica? If you go back to COVID in Barbados, $1.8 billion from my recollection, $1.8 billion um, were given to Barbados during COVID alone. Okay, and today they're still borrowing. You're asking the question, where's the money going? Because we're not seeing any infrastructural development. Um, we're not seeing our roads being fixed. We're not seeing better medical facilities being constructed. We're not seeing the QEH having all of the state of our equipment that they need. So you got to ask yourself exactly what's going on. And then you look at these outrageous interest rates that they're being given. And when you realize what is happening is that they know paying these loans back is not on them, it's on the taxpayers.
Mhm.
Okay, so it becomes a game that they're running on their own people because at the end of 5 years they're going to probably be removed from office, but I guarantee you that loan and paying that debt back will still be there no matter what other government takes power, and that money has to be paid, and it has to be paid by the taxpayers. So when you're looking at all of these situations, I've come to realize from my own studying that this is a game that they're playing in Caribbean countries, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, we have we have too many leaders in the Caribbean that are still playing games with these for at the expense of not allowing their people to advance and not allowing their countries to go any further. And they're still maintaining this level of, Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, Grenada, Guyana, all of these countries, third world. That's the term, third world. Smaller developing island states. All of this nonsense that they're consistently keeping our nations and we're not developing our industry, we're not developing the technologies that we need to advance our nation, to move our nation.
Yes.
So and it's constantly this
Right.
large sums of money that keeps coming in all the time, and we're asking, where is the money? What's the need for this? Before you know it, You'll see 30 buses coming to Barbados, and right on the buses, China aid. So you're asking yourself, okay, well, you just borrowed money to, you just got another 500 million from the IDB. You just got another 280 million from the IMF, another 100 million, 150 million from the World Bank. And yet the buses you couldn't purchase those buses free and clear. They had to be part of a China's package to you. So you start thinking, you start realizing, now something is wrong here. As
Yes.
they say, the math isn't mathing.
Right. The question we need to ask, Apostle, who is receiving this money? Is the money really being received by these governments, or are the elites getting them, and they're the global elites and also the domestic elites, and then they're telling us that that is our money, it's our debt, but it's
Right.
not really our
Right.
debt because we are not benefiting from the money, as you're saying.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, the other part that yeah, sorry.
You
Go
mentioned
ahead.
a point in terms of the leaders, and that is a very critical point you raised. What can the leaders do? Because as I suggested to you, Bruce Golding, he gave him his credit. He did stand up
Right.
to the IMF and told them that he wasn't able to reduce the public sector employment because he knew that there would have been a revolution in Jamaica. But the IMF created this distraction, and which caused him to have demitted office. So that is what they
Right.
do too. If leaders stand
Yeah.
up to them, then they are going to get you out of office.
Exactly. Well, I think what is important also is because the information is not, um, it's not dissected, it's not properly released
Mm-hmm.
um, into
Good
the
point.
community. The
Mm-hmm.
people can't back the leader when the leader is standing up.
That's it.
See? So
That's it.
what has to happen is that when you have a leader that is standing up to these people, that the information is disseminated across the country so that you have the backing of the people.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what happened is that Bruce Golding didn't have the backing of Jamaica when he made that stand, and he didn't
Yes.
have the backing of Caribbean leaders when he took that stand. Because I
Correct.
remember
That's a
when
yes.
I,
Yes.
I remember when Hillary Clinton came down there. I remember that. Um,
Yes.
but the reality is that I also have to add this because,
Mm-hmm.
as I said, I like history.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key things that I know about China
Yes.
is that China has always been a conquering nation, the
Mm-hmm.
Mongols.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? They will conquer their own people to take over a province. Okay? And that's one of the reasons why the Great Wall of China was built. The Great Wall of China was built to protect one province from another
Mm-hmm.
because they have that conquering mindset. And they have not lost it.
Yes.
They still have it today, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not using swords and horses and, uh, you know, they're using economics. They're using
Yes.
money
Yes.
to control, and um, they're still carrying out their agenda. And
Mm-hmm.
the agenda that they have is world domination.
Yes.
And it's so clear, in terms of what they're doing. And unfortunately, as I said, we do not have the leadership in the Caribbean that understands what China is attempting to do. A lot of what
Yes.
China is doing in our nations, they're masking aid. They're
Mm-hmm.
masking aid as a part of their world domination plan.
I agree
And
with you.
I can tell you for a fact that even right here in Barbados, we have several areas here where uh, the Chinese have already taken over certain lands here in the island.
Mm-hmm.
Just early this year, we had a situation where there were some helicopters from the U.S. Air
Mm-hmm.
Force that were flying across Barbados, and we
Mm-hmm.
were told not to take pictures of them. And I got intelligence from an individual that said that they were actually carrying out sorties because of the different areas where the Chinese are. They were actually doing sonographs to determine whether the Chinese were building underground bunkers from where
Mm-hmm.
they may be able to launch missiles out of Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
and and it's credible information. So
Hmm.
beyond taking loans from these countries, especially China, our governments and our leaders must be very, very careful that they're not buying into something that will turn around and bite them in the behind. And I think, unfortunately, so much of it has already taken place that it's pretty hard right now to pull it back. So we have to be very careful here in the Caribbean right now.
You mentioned something that is critical, Apostle, and the fact is that our democratic state is no longer democratic. First of all, the IMF is
Okay.
not a democratic institution. The IMF and the World Bank, they tell you what they want, and you have to do it, or you
Right.
suffer the consequences. So that is what
Right.
we have
Okay.
to understand, that the IMF is not a democratic institution. Another thing, because it's not democratic, they don't tell the citizens what they are going to do. Where are the memoranda of
Correct. Correct.
understanding? We don't know where they are.
Correct.
Like Jamaica says that it's
Correct.
68, it has reduced its debt to 68% of GDP, but we don't see a memorandum of understanding. So we are
Okay.
just
Okay.
hearing what they're telling us, but we don't have any evidence, any concrete evidence that they are doing, or this is the real agreement. Nobody really
Yeah.
knows. That is what the media tells us, and we just accept it, and that is a problem.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, many times you would hear the government just received another 150 million US dollar loan from the IMF. You never hear the government is approaching the IMF. You never hear this is what the money will be going towards. You just hear that they got this money. Okay,
Yes.
and and to me, if Barbados just became a republic, and from the definition of a republic is that the power is given to the people, and to individuals
Without
that
a
they elect.
constitution?
So where's the power of
Without
the
a
people?
constitution. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
without a constitution. So I really
So
don't
there's
know how
no
we
power to
got
the
here, but
people. Without a constitution,
eh,
there's no power. In fact, I was saying on my program that Mia Mottley is ruling by decree. Because if you have
right,
no constitution, then she is ruling by a decree. The people should have
right,
risen up and said, we cannot be governed without a constitution. Even the United States,
exactly.
it cannot be governed without a constitution. It has to have
That's
a
correct.
constitution if it's going to be a republic. It's a critical
Exactly.
document.
So yeah, you have a situation here. A gentleman was explaining to me that he was friend of his was pulled over by the police. He was caught speeding,
Mm-hmm.
and so the police came to him and said, "Sir, we're carrying out this speed trap and all this stuff." And he says, "Well, we caught you doing 86 in the highway, which is 80 kilometers." And he said he allowed him to speak, and then finally he said to the police officer, he says, "Sir, under which constitution are you reporting me?"
That's it.
That's what
That's
he
it.
said. He told him, he said,
Yeah.
"Under which constitution are you reporting me?"
Mm-hmm.
He said, "We just
Yes.
became a republic. We just finished off with England's constitution, and we do not yet have a present constitution." And he
Brilliant
said, "Do you
response.
not know that you can only be a law enforcement officer under the constitution?"
Mm-hmm. And
And
where is the constitution? You know?
exactly. So he said, his friend told him, "Sir, please step away from my vehicle."
Yes.
Say,
Yes.
and it goes to show you, if you don't know, you don't know.
You don't know.
And the
Hmm.
danger that Barbados is, the danger that Barbados, the very dangerous place that we are in right now, is to be masquerading that we are a republic without a
Hmm.
constitution. Who does
Absolutely.
that? Who takes
That
the
is what
country
Jamaica is trying to do also.
into
And I
the
think
state of a republic?
hmm that is what Jamaica is trying to do also, but I think that it's more complicated there for them to do that.
Right.
I don't see how they are going to do that. But I think the pandemic, Mia Mottley was very skillful, and she used the pandemic as a way of pushing it through. Maybe
Yes.
if Jamaica had done that, maybe they would have gotten through to. But right now,
Right.
unless there's a pandemic or some emergency, it's going to be very difficult for them to impose that republic. The people want it. I think most people want the country to be transformed into a republic, but they don't want
Yeah.
the fact that there won't be any constitution and other things that come with the republic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that uh, they understand that society is changing, and if you are now planning, and especially Barbados is increasing in terms of its crime, and we
Hmm.
have a different cross section of our population right now. It's difficult to draft the constitution when your society is in a state of change.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
and these are some of the things that they should have looked at before they decided to take the country into republic. The other element is that we have very learned individuals here in Barbados that should have seen this coming. They should have said, no, you can't do this. I mean, we have judges here, we have lawyers here, we have major economists, we have people who are travel around the Caribbean and around the world that are part of councils and different levels that should have said, no, I think we're putting the cart before the horse here. And
But I think you
said,
have
no,
answered your question. Yeah, I think you have answered your question, the Apostle. The fact that the economics, Barbados does not control the economics of the country, the economic destiny
right.
of the country because of the debt, this debt trap that the IMF and the World Bank have imposed upon countries like Jamaica and Barbados. No matter how
Hmm.
educated we are bought out and we're sold. And that is
Pretty
what
much.
has happened.
Pretty
So
much.
people understand that no matter how much they talk, that they will not be heard, they will not be listened to because they have bought out the media, they've bought out our academic institutions, they've bought out our
Yes. Yeah.
legal infrastructure.
Yeah.
Everything is
Yeah.
really bought out. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much. And I think um, unlike China, who've done, I don't remember which president. I think it was Barack Obama who was stating that um, he was talking about the amount of structural engineers that
Hmm.
China produces on a daily basis
Hmm.
um, versus
The
America.
US. Hmm.
Yeah, and I
Hmm.
think I think he said something like um, 30,000 structural engineers versus America's 3,000
Yes.
or something like that.
Yes.
But it was
Yes.
a huge margin. The ratio
Hmm.
was huge. And again, let's bring that home to the Caribbean.
Hmm.
Why are we not producing the people we need here in our islands to do
Well,
the
they
very
go.
jobs that we're asking, you know?
Yeah. But we do produce them. We do produce them, Apostle, but they leave. Well, I'm not sure about Barbados,
Yeah.
but in the case of Guyana, for example, that produce a lot of educated people, very brilliant people, Jamaica to a lesser extent, but we have produced some very good people too, but they don't stay
Right.
there because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not getting the opportunities. So we are the second. Jamaica, as I was telling Marcia, is the second country in terms of brain drain, the rate of brain drain, a high rate of
Wow.
brain drain there. So all our skilled workers and laborers are and educated people, the intellectuals are leaving
Hmm.
every year because the IMF
Wow.
strictures, they're not going to stay there. But what I want to even segue into is the fact that we as Caribbean citizens can look at what is happening in the United States now and tell Americans that you are going through the same crisis with Trump. Because
Right.
all of this
Right.
austerity and all of
Exactly.
this trying now to take away their social security, their safety, their social safety networks, all of that now he is destroying. It shows
Yes.
us that
Yes.
they are now going through their IMF ordeal that they never
Right.
understood us when we were telling them that this is what we went through. And that's why we had to leave our countries. But where are Americans
Right.
going to go? They have nowhere to run. And that's the problem that we're facing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we faced a lot of that. I remember Barbados at one point in time. We used to boast about our literacy rate. 97, 90%, 98% literacy. And I
Hmm.
remember years ago, I was in Tortola,
Hmm.
and my first trip there, and the gentleman who was the superintendent of prisons there in Tortola was a Barbadian. And
Hmm.
so when he heard that there was a group from Barbados there, um, he came to see us. So we had lunch with him, and asked him, listen, how did you get to be the superintendent of prisons here in Tortola and not home in Barbados? And he made a very powerful statement. He said Barbados is at the level where we export people.
Yes. 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 And we just want to say here that the lowering
Yeah.
of our debt, as they're suggesting, investing to us, the IMF and the World Bank, does not really
Right.
mean that our debt is, is lowered. That's what they tell us.
Yeah.
But if you notice that it's a circle that you go into
It's
the
a
IMF
circle.
and for some years
Circle.
you say you're finished. And for example, in 1995, Jamaica's at the top to the IMF. They goodbye, and then all of a sudden we were back in the IMF, in the throes of the IMF in 2008. Right? And then it's like a never-ending circle. They're telling us that
Correct.
we've lowered our debt, and then it comes back again. What I say, Apostle, is that the elites, the Barbadian elites, the Jamaican elites, and the global elites,
Right.
they are the ones who rack up the debt, and then they tell
Right.
us, the citizens, that we are the ones who have to pay down their debt. And this
Yeah.
is the trick. This is the deception. Many of us buy into it because we say, yes, if we borrow the debt and we are indebted, we have to pay our debt. But whose debt is it? It's not
Exactly.
ours.
Exactly.
That's
Well, you go back to 2004, 2005 when we had the worldwide economic crisis, and you saw plainly that the reality is that the elites were playing poker with people.
Mhm.
You know, you saw really that the ones who created the problem isn't the average person who's working up there 9 to 5. It's actually the people who are at the helm of what's going on. And they had showed that there was one gentleman who his bonus that year was 475 million. That was his bonus. That's not his salary. That was his
Mhm.
bonus.
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of these individuals. And then I think that was during President Obama's term. And then he had to do the bailout, I think, with the Detroit automakers. He had to do the 700 billion dollar bailout for those industries to keep them going.